Our scripture today is from Matthew chapter 12. At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry, and they began to pluck heads of grain and to eat. When the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath." He said to them, "Have you not read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? How he entered the house of God, and they ate the bread of the presence, which it was not lawful for him or his companions to eat, but only for the priests. Or have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath the priests in the temple break the Sabbath and yet are guiltless? I tell you, something greater than the temple is here. But if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless, for the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath." He left that place and entered their synagogue. A man was there with a withered hand, and they asked him, "Is it lawful to cure on the Sabbath?" So that they might accuse him. He said to them, "Suppose one of you has only one sheep, and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath. Will you not lay hold of it and lift it out? How much more valuable is a human being than a sheep? So it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath." They said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and it was restored, as sound as the other. But the Pharisees went out and conspired against him, how to destroy him. The Gospel of our Lord. Hi, so good to see you here in the synagogue. I'm Jephthah, and God blessed me by breaking my arm. You don't believe me? Well, let me tell you a little story. My father was a carpenter, and so, of course, that's what I grew up learning how to do. And I saw how hard he worked, and I thought, wow, it's a lot of work being a carpenter. But it's the only trade that he knew that he could teach me, so that's what I was going to learn. But the whole time I was learning, it's like, he works really hard and doesn't make a lot of money. If I get good enough, I bet I can make a lot of money as a carpenter. And so I paid attention to what he did, learned all the techniques, and pretty soon I started making, in addition to doing repairs and building houses and fixing roofs, I also started making furniture. And my dad was a good carpenter. I'd say he was more functional than kind of artistic. And I figured that if I could get good at making really beautiful furniture, not only would people here in the town buy it, but the Romans down the road might give me a pretty penny for it. And so that's what I started doing. I started making some beautiful furniture. I got so good at carving. And of course, the craftsmanship, they were solid as a rock. And sure enough, I started making a lot of money. Most of my sales actually were in Sepphoris, a little Greek town, a Roman town, not too far away, but pretty far away. But they had the money. And so I became rather well known in Capernaum there. And I started getting rather rich too. And then one day, I noticed I was struggling with just the normal stuff I was doing. It wasn't a big deal. I could still make the furniture. But my hands just didn't want to work quite right. And every day it got a little bit worse. And I think it was only like a month or two when all of a sudden I was having a hard time just holding my tools. And before long, I couldn't make anything. And it was devastating. And everybody in town knew I made this beautiful furniture. And they said, why aren't you making more furniture? And I'd hold up my hand and they kind of cringe back. And they would ask, why did God do this to you? You made such beautiful furniture. Why has God taken away your ability to do that? I started wondering that myself. What had I done that was so wrong that God would punish me in this way? About the best I could come up with is maybe I just got too proud. I got too full of myself, my ability to make beautiful furniture. But this seemed like an awfully hard thing for God to do to me. But I didn't have any other explanation. All I knew was that my hand just didn't work anymore. I tried to find other ways of working. All I knew really was carpentry, though. Wasn't good at numbers and that kind of stuff. Didn't really like talking to people that much, and so couldn't farm. I mean, there was so much of the work was manual, which means using your hands, and I only had one good hand. For a year or two there, I went through the money that I'd built up and finally had to just start asking friends for help. It was almost to the point where it looked like I was going to have to start begging people just to have enough to eat. But I did go to the synagogue every Sabbath. So one Sabbath I was there. There was some kind of commotion going on, and this guy walks in, and there's these Pharisees that are like tailing him. It's like they were watching him. Like, I mean, by the look on their faces, they weren't supporters. It looked like they were scrutinizing everything that he did. And they were in some kind of conversation about Sabbath and not working and things like that, which we all knew. You don't work on the Sabbath. But then they noticed me, these Pharisees, religious leaders, and they brought me into the conversation. They pointed to me and said, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" It's like, wait a second, I'm not in the middle of this. On the other hand, my ears perked up. Healing? Was this guy someone that could heal my hand? So I found out his name was Jesus. And he responded some examples about how David and his soldiers took the bread of the presence and things like that, and something about, pulling sheep out. I was kind of listening, but my head was just spinning. Is this guy really a healer? Is he someone who could restore my hand? Then he looked at me. Actually, before he looked at me, he said something that was obvious to me. It is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Like, duh. How could this be part of their argument? But Jesus said that, and then he looked at me and he said, "Stretch out your hand." So I took my hand and I stretched it out, including my fingers, and they could move again. And just like that, my hand was healed. I remember I was aware that all these religious leaders just kind of walked out at that point. But there I was with Jesus, this man who had restored my ability to do anything. And he said to me, "I understand that you're a carpenter." He said, "The father who raised me was a carpenter." And then he said, "Use your ability to help others." And then he left. All of a sudden, I could use my hand again. but it's like my world turned upside down. Instead of my whole orientation being about, okay, how can I make furniture that'll make me lots of money? I was just so in touch with the joy of being able to do anything with my hands again. And so instead of work as something to get money or something that I had to do, I saw it as an opportunity to help my neighbors, to help my friends, my family, to help people that were in need. Now, I still need to make money. And so I made some really fancy furniture. I'd sell it to the Romans. But because of all the money they gave me, then I really had the ability. When I heard that somebody needed help or came to me for a simple job, I could just really listen to them and kind of discover, okay, what really is their need? And so I would make furniture for them, or fix their house or build their house. But for those that couldn't pay very much, I didn't charge very much. There are some folks, they were in sad shape, kind of shape that I had been in. And I just said, don't worry about it. Here, this is for you. And it gave me such joy. And for 30 years, I had the use of my hands. And I got to make this furniture that I knew was good for the community. And it was so much better than just being after the money and doing stuff for folks far away that I didn't know. Instead, I was working for the people near me, folks that needed help. And it felt so good. But I said, God blessed me with a broken arm. Well, I'm probably getting a little too old to be up on ladders, especially ladders that are as old as I am. And sure enough, one of them gave way. And I just fell last week and broke my arm. But it just reminded me what a gift it has been to have the use of my hands and to be able to contribute to the community for 30 years, something that at one point I thought I was just useless and I couldn't do anything for anybody. So God blessed me with a broken arm because God blessed me not just with two hands that work, but also with the clarity and the vision of using my abilities to help others. Oh yeah, about this whole Sabbath thing. I do believe it is good you can do good on the Sabbath. And so every Sabbath, when I was spending time with the family, I would whittle. Because this guy Jesus, after he was there in Capernaum, he went down to Jerusalem and they killed him. But that wasn't the end of the story. After they killed him 3 days later, he rose from the dead. He even came back to Galilee, and I didn't get to see him, but many of my friends did. So I was thinking, those Romans, they used the cross as a symbol of fear. They used the cross as something to intimidate, make people afraid so they can keep their thumb on us. But this guy named Jesus, he showed that they don't really have any power. And so it occurred to me that that cross, instead of being a symbol of fear and terror, through him, had become a symbol of hope, of life, and especially of love. So I'm not completely sure if I'm breaking the Sabbath, but every Sabbath, I just spend time whittling crosses. And I give them to people and tell them the story about this man who gave me my life back, who showed me what life was really about, and how this man not only did it for me, but wants each of you to live also. Thank you for listening to my story.